Good morning. Chris Lee and Gavin Schoenwald of Southeastern 14 here to talk some SEC football after an exciting weekend with ramifications for the SEC title chase, for the football playoff. I mean, all kinds of stuff. This next few weeks are going to be fascinating. We are going to be here for all of it. First, a reminder, if you're interested in sponsoring the channel, caroline.smith at Southeastern 14 is the way you make an inquiry. Gavin Schoenwald, good to have you back, my man. Lots of interesting stuff in the SEC over the weekend. We're going to spend most of our time talking about Alabama, but later in the show, I want to get to how I think Georgia-Florida is a sneakily good game. Not something I had thought I would be saying before the season. That's going to have some impact on the conference and the playoff chase. We've got LSU laying out there in the weeds, drumming Army this weekend, 62-0. I think LSU, Alabama, 2 weeks from now is potentially the game of the year in the SEC. So lots to unpack quickly before we get into Alabama. Your overriding thoughts of the weekend, I guess.
Man, I think obviously the big one, we'll get into a lot of the details here soon, but just really fascinating game all around between how it started and how it shifted and how it ended, right? Really unique game there. Ole Miss going to Auburn, thought it was going to be an emotional, for Hugh Freeze and a charged atmosphere. It was exactly that, a little bit closer than I thought. Interesting stuff, obviously, over in Arkansas. We did a video about Chris, I believe it was you and Blaine did that about Dan Enos in Arkansas. If you haven't seen that, y'all go check it out. But yeah, a lot of storylines. We talked about this being a fork in the road week for a lot of teams, and it sure was. So we'll get into that here in the show.
Yeah, either a fork in the road or stick a fork in you. Dan Enos had a fork stuck in him. Tennessee's playoff hopes probably had a fork stuck in them, although I think the Vols are still a 1% shot according to ESPN's FPI. And sorry, I keep referencing that same one. They're the only ones that are doing it that I see right now. I've got national championship odds at places, but just making the playoff itself, not a lot of people out there doing odds on that. I don't really understand why. Tennessee, just for the record, has got games going forward at Kentucky, UConn, at Missouri, Georgia, Vandy. So, if Tennessee were to run the table in that, then absolutely, I think there's a chance. I say absolutely. There's a chance Tennessee's in the conversation at this point because that would be an impressive run. And, you just don't know what's going to happen elsewhere. And my goodness, God help you if you can figure out what's going to happen elsewhere. But, all right, Gavin, let's go to Alabama, Tennessee. From an Alabama standpoint, what did you take away from that game, good and bad?
I think, let's start with bad so we can end with the good news. I think the bad news was you may have been, in terms of the week of prep, a little bit, I don't want to say the word out-coached with Heupel and Saban, but, I mean, whatever game plan Tennessee had coming out the gate, man, it was spot on. I mean, they looked perfect offensively. Joe Milton was literally perfect. I think he was 9 for 9 and was driving down the field at will. Unbelievable plays from Squirrel White. He played a huge role in this
gracious,
game.
Yes.
Great catch there for a touchdown and little chunk gains for 12, 14, 15 along the way. There was a moment in that first half where literally Tennessee looked unstoppable and Alabama couldn't do anything about it. And there was a dropped pass. I believe it was on the 5 or the 6 yard line. And Milton up to that point was 9 for 9. And that drop pass was his first incompletion. And after that, he ended up going for like 2 for 9 over his next 9. And so I look back at, as a player, I remember for me, it was like specific turning points in the game. That was potentially one because Tennessee stalled and Alabama held him to a field goal. And then it happened again. That game was, it was what, 13-0? It could have easily been 21, easily. And so out the gate, bad news for Tennessee. I think they got out-schemed during the week in terms of their game plan. The good news is, whatever Saban and that staff said to them at halftime and whatever halftime adjustments was, man, he totally dominated Tennessee in the second half. And so from an Alabama perspective, I think you question, where was the fire pregame? Thought this was a revenge game, but, sure enough, it was just a scheme thing. Man, they fixed those at halftime.
Yeah. Well, Bama bags a big win in the end and a resume-building win for the playoff committee. I mean, we'll see. Tennessee could could finish 8-4, 7-5, and at that point, maybe it doesn't look as good on paper. I think Tennessee's going to finish better than that. Alabama to this point is now banked wins over, let's see, wins of significance. I'll just leave it at that. At Ole Miss, that's a win of significance. At A&M, win of significance.
Yep.
Tennessee, win of significance. Might have said Arkansas, a week or two ago, but that's its own story for a different video. So, yeah, I would say that. Look, not a lot of teams at this point have just got this laundry list of big wins. Alabama is going to have chances at many more. LSU would be a big win. At Kentucky would be a big win. At Auburn would be a big win. Let's start there. I'm looking down the list of playoff contenders. I think right now ESPN's FPI handicaps, 17 teams with the 0.5% chance or better to get to the playoff. And this is not including a potential conference game scenario. That's a whole different animal we would need to get into, potential matchups, who we think will get there. So we're just going to end this at the regular season. Your teams right now that are going to be favored in every game according to the model that I've got set up, which is just based on for a few computers that I think are pretty good. The teams are going to be favored in every game from here on out. Alabama, which already has one loss. Oklahoma, which does not have a loss. Florida State, which does not have a loss. Michigan, which does not have a loss. Georgia, which does not have a loss. A one-loss Texas team is going to be favored in every game. An undefeated Washington team is going to be favored in every game, although that Southern Cal game is going to be close to a pick'em, as is Oregon State.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oregon is going to be favored in every game, but it's got one loss. Ole Miss is not going to be favored in every game. And I think that's it. You got some other teams in the picture: Oregon State, Utah, North Carolina, Kansas State, Missouri, long shots there. All those are going to be favored to at least lose one game. So the reason I'm setting this up this way is, look, Alabama's probably going to have to go unbeaten to get itself in position. So I did think, and I'm going to go over the odds in every game we're going forward, but it's on a list of, what are I named, 6 or 7 teams that's probably going to win out. So that, again, I say win out. The conference title game is going to take care of some of that.
Right.
But point is, to get to that position, you're going to have to get there. But you got a lot of other teams they're also favored to win out, although by narrow margins in a lot of cases. And some of those teams are starting with one fewer loss than Alabama.
Well, I think that for Bama, the path is definitely there. And I think when you're playing for a coach, a program like that, that path can be a little more clear than if, you were Ole Miss and banking on winning every game the rest of the year. I think it's a little more possible for Alabama. In my opinion, I really have, and you're right, that the conference championship stuff, it weeds some of it out, but it may also make some of it a little bit more murky, to be honest with you. Like what happened with Texas and Oklahoma, if they meet again and Texas beats them, they're both 12. They're both what I guess will be, 12-1, right? 12-1, and one has a championship, the other one doesn't. But the one loss is the team they already beat, and so it's just getting all that kind of stuff. What happens if Washington and Florida State run the table and they end up at 13-0? To me, that's an automatic in, right? That's an automatic in. And so then you talk about what's going on in the Big 12 between Texas and Oklahoma. What happens if Georgia and Alabama play in Atlanta and Alabama beats them? Both those guys are 12-1. Alabama has SC. I mean, it's going to get messy, and we're not even talking about the tiebreaker stuff in the Big 10, y'all. And so it's going to get messy down the road if these teams kind of win out like we're saying they are. And who knows? It may be the perfect alley-oop for this to be the last year of 4 teams and expanding it next year. But we shall see. But yeah, for Bama, I think they got to win out. They showed, especially in that second half, that they still have a ton of talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Milroe's got guys. That post that he threw over the top to open up the second half was an amazing route. That's stuff that we usually see, that we've been talking about, how they don't have first-round guys. I mean, that was a first-round type play that kid made, hitting a little two-step at the top of the route and going a post over the top wide open. And so it's stuff like that coming into fruition. I think this is a different path that Nick Saban's Bama teams are used to taking. Usually they're number one in the team to beat, and now they're kind of, because that early loss to Texas, they had to come from the rear a little bit and and slice some demons down the stretch. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens the rest of this year. But I'd be shocked if it wasn't Bama and Georgia playing for a playoff spot in Atlanta.
Okay. ESPN's FPI and its playoff odds. I'm just going to give you the top few. Ohio State, 74% chance to make it. Oklahoma, 64%. Florida State, 59%. That went way up after Florida State beat Duke this weekend. Michigan, 46%. Then you get into a tie for fifth by just a couple of decimal points between Alabama and Georgia at basically 31%. Interestingly enough, if those teams were to meet in the championship game, the computers have that as an absolute toss-up right now. We'll table that for a minute, but just to get there, here's what Alabama is going to need to do. It is going to need to beat LSU. It'll be about a 4-point favorite in that, according to the model I put together. At Kentucky, it is going to be about a 13-point favorite. Chattanooga, Alabama by about 42 in that one. Auburn, Alabama is going to be about a 13-point favorite according to the model. Now, I think that being a rivalry game and Auburn having played really well at home, that's going to be a little lower than that, but that's just what it spit out. And then Georgia, which again, presuming Georgia gets to the title game, which I don't think is given, but pretty good chance. But, I mean, some roadblocks in the way for Georgia. But this isn't about Georgia. This is about Alabama. I think the most likely outcome, according to the predicted model, just game by game, is that we're going to see Alabama and Georgia and Atlanta. Mm-hmm. But that LSU game 2 weeks from now, man.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants any part of LSU. And right now, if I'm just saying we play a game today, who in the SEC do you least want to face? I think the answer might be LSU.
I think it's LSU because you see how dangerous they are, and you think that they're better than their ranking or what they've done so far. Because we saw that early loss, that beatdown loss to Florida State, and people kind of kept them in the rear view. Look, I know they dropped another one since, but still, what? Alabama's really lucky this game's in Tuscaloosa, because if it was in Baton Rouge, I'd be really nervous. And so, look, I think that playing LSU now is all about containing Jayden Daniels. That guy deserves a spot in New York. We've seen guys in years past even win the Heisman on teams that ended up going like 8-4. And I'm not saying LSU is going to even be that bad, but just because he's not in the playoff doesn't mean, or LSU fell short of their team expectations. I think Jayden Daniels is probably the best player in this conference, if we're being honest. Yeah. And so what he's been able to do so far, can they contain him? Whatever adjustments they made against Tennessee, that's what needs to happen, against LSU and Tuscaloosa here in 2 weeks for that Bama defense, because they were fast, they were violent, creating. I saw for Tennessee's first 4 possessions, they came away with points on 3 of the 4. Touchdown, field goal. For the next 10, they came away with points on 1. And so whatever type of adjustments they made throughout the game, whatever their initial game plan was on their keys to the game, which is something you go through as a player and your coordinators and position coaches you meet throughout the week, that was changed at halftime or maybe halfway through the second quarter. And man, did they bring it for the rest of that game. So they need to figure out the formula that works best, because they're going to be playing a different animal with Jayden Daniels and LSU offense.
You look at that defense, and I think this is where, if you're Alabama, you've got your hopes, because that defense, I don't know that it's been vintage like top 5 Alabama defense of all time good. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's there. And look, that is a beauty pageant in all beauty pageants when we get into that topic. But since the Texas game, they give up 34 in a loss. They give up 3 to South Florida, 10 to a really high-powered Ole Miss offense, 17 to Mississippi State in a game they were running away with, 20 to Texas A&M in a game that's always a difficult matchup for them, 21 to Arkansas. That looks bad now after what Arkansas did this weekend, and 20 to Tennessee, but all those in the first half. I feel like the defense is championship caliber. Yards per play, they got to be, I don't know, I would think top 2 or 3 in the league at this point. I don't have the stat sheet in front of me. I think that's what gets them there, is that defense and the ability to generate some big plays on offense, which we'll get to in a minute. But I think that, okay, a couple things going for you right now. If you're Alabama, you're going to be favored to win every remaining game until the SEC title game. And then right now it's a toss-up against Georgia. And number 2, your defense is good enough to get you there.
Yeah. And look, I don't think this Bama defense is, Hall of Fame defense, or we're going to be talking about this defense here in 10 years, but I got to give credit where it's due. Kevin Steele's got those guys playing really well right now. And, or I guess I should say right now, when they do turn it on, whether that was the second half or whatever it was, but they've shown glimpses in the past. And I think also too, we were so hesitant on this team as a whole because their identity, they finally figured it out. I don't think they had any clue who they were because they were so used to having these elite quarterbacks who were going to go 1-2 in the NFL, these 3 first-round receivers. It's just a different makeup of a team. And I think that they had to get used to that a little bit in the first couple of weeks. And, we all wrote them off because what we saw in back-to-back weeks was a loss at home, which we never see. And they went on the road and played a way lesser of a team in USF and really struggled. And we're not used to seeing that. And so when we saw that back-to-back, I think a lot of people kind of just wrote them off and thinking, this isn't the same team. Saban's thinking about retirement, making an appearance on the McAfee show every week. He's already got his foot out the door, all that kind of stuff. And sure enough, here we are talking about Alabama having a path to the playoff. And it's just, I got to give credit where it's due to Saban and his staff, and especially what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball now, cranking that up and then finding their big plays on offense, whether it's Milroe over the top or McClellan, who's a tough runner in himself. So I got to give credit where it's due. I feel like a lot of people wrote him off after those first 2 weeks.
Yeah, they did. Defense, yards per play, Alabama number 2 in the conference right now, behind Georgia, and Alabama's played I would say significantly more difficult schedule than Georgia. So it's not apples to apples, but point is they're up there either way and might be number 1. Okay, now here's the problem. I want to read you some stuff in Alabama's games this year because we had Tyler Siskey on the show a couple weeks ago. He's a personnel guy. He is coached in this league for Alabama and Ole Miss. He made a comment. He said, I feel like if I'm starting a team right now, I want to get 4 5-star defensive linemen, 5 5-star offensive linemen, and a quarterback. Everywhere else I can be average and we'll be fine. Now, I don't know that I completely agree with that because I think if you've got a gaping hole at corner, that can get exploited. But, he knows more football than I do. So let's take him at his word.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's such coach speak and cliche to hear, it starts up front. And, I feel like as receivers, they roll their eyes because they want to, catch 1,000 balls and 100 touchdowns and whatnot. But it really does because you can, if you have pass rushers that covers up mistakes, they cover up mistakes in the secondary. I don't think you have to have that lockdown corner if you can get to the quarterback in, 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, whatever it may be. Offensive line wise, it covers up you having, maybe not elite receivers because it gives them more time to get open. What makes the elite guys like we've seen with, Jerry Jeudy in the past and all those great guys at Alabama, and really it's in this conference as a whole, is they can get open fast. And when you have a great offensive line, that can cover that up and gives them more time to get out of breaks. And so for both sides, I think it opens up the skill positions, but that's where you see the biggest discrepancies between teams like Alabama, between teams like Georgia, who has those guys up front, against teams like, Mississippi State or Arkansas now, who obviously do not.
Yeah, and this is where I was going to go with this next, okay? I think the quarterback part, as much fire as Jalen Milroe has come under this year, Gavin, when they get off passes, they've been pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
They're averaging, I think, what it is at 9.6 yards per pass attempt. That doesn't adjust for sacks, but just passes they get off. Now, you take the South Florida game out of it, that's 10.3. Yep. And the reason I take that one out of it, Milroe did not play. I think the team laid down in that game. I think they had a divided locker room over the quarterback, and I think that's how it showed up. So I kind of throw that one out because I think it's irrelevant in the sample. So, 10.3 yards per pass attempt. I would think that's top 2 or 3 in the country at that point. So when they get them off, they're pretty good.
Yep.
Here's the problem. Okay. And I'm going to go every game they've played this year, and you will see the common denominator. The best game in terms of this, 24 pass plays against Middle Tennessee State, 9.4 per, 2 sacks. Texas, 27 plays, again, 9.4, 5 sacks. USF, I'll throw the one out for the quarterback play, but one constant, they got sacked 5 times. Ole Miss, 21 pass attempts, 10.7 per, 4 sacks. Mississippi State, 13, 12.6, and 4. Texas A&M, 33 passes, 9.7 per, 6 sacks. Arkansas, 21 pass attempts, 11.3 per. 5 sacks. Tennessee, 20 pass attempts, 10.5 per. 4 sacks. This is unbelievable consistency. I
Yeah.
mean, they are
Yeah.
right around that. This isn't a game where they had an outlier game and it skewed the stat sheet. When they get the ball off, they are hitting passes against everybody, but they are not getting the ball off enough against anybody. There's not a game in there, Gavin. That is now 7 games in a row where they have given up between 4 and 6 sacks.
Yeah.
And that is my concern.
Well,
I just don't know that you can get where you want to go when your pass protection is that shaky every week, and it does not matter who you're playing.
Yeah, and that's a huge question mark too, because we knew this coming into this game, and so one of the things I was watching in this Tennessee Alabama game is how are they going to be able to protect Milroe, because it's been a stigma with this team so far is that they can't protect the quarterback. So that's something I was intentionally watching, and as I was intentionally watching the game and watching the offensive line how they protect Milroe, I think don't get me wrong, they're not nearly the quality of offensive line they've had recently, but my man holds onto the ball for a long time too, Chris.
Yeah.
He holds that ball for a long time. And so, there's sacks on the offensive line for sure, but then there's also sacks on the quarterback. And I believe there was even an instance where they were running off the field after a drive, and I think you could read Saban's lips on the sideline saying, you got to get rid of the ball. And so seeing that and us seeing it, and I'm sure it's something they talk about throughout the week in their process. But to me, he holds on the ball for a long time. And that's why I think also when they do hit it is because they're going for the deep one. And so he's always looking for that deep one. Don't get me wrong. He's fine throwing underneath. But, when you sell out for that deep ball and the big play, which we all know, Alabama's been a big play offense this year. They've been dependent on the big play. You also run a little bit of a risk of holding on to the ball for too long for guys to get open. That's how you get sacks. And so I think a lot of it is a combination of, look, it hasn't been elite offensive line play at the same time. I think Milroe holds on to it for a little bit longer. And so I guarantee you that's something that they're going through this bye week, and in bye weeks, the SEC specifically, but also I'm sure all across college football, it's all about self-scout. You're not looking, maybe towards the end of the week, they'll look at LSU, but for these first couple days up until Thursday, it's going to be all about, what are ways we can more improve? What are some things that, we can do? Because I guarantee you they're doing a deep dive in their statistics in terms of sacks per game and yard, just like you just did, Chris, right there when you ran through that. I guarantee that's something they've already discussed. And so if we know it, I guarantee you Saban and those guys know it, and they'll be working on it this bye week.
When you watch them, how much of that is on Milroe? How much of it is on the line?
Well, that's what I was getting to a point is I think that
right. But I want you to put a number on it, because I heard what you said. I'm just curious, is it 60-40? Is it 50-50?
I would say it's probably right between 60-40, 70-30 in terms of the heavier number being on the offensive line. Because if you had an elite offensive line, doesn't matter how long my man holds onto the ball, right? He could hold on to that forever. But look, eventually there are guys breaking through and getting sacks. And so look, at the same time, I'm telling you, there was multiple offensive plays in that game where I would watch and literally be like, all right, throw the ball. And then sure enough, he goes down. So, maybe for every 4 sacks, every one, maybe 2 is on Milroe. But for the most part, like I said, if the offensive line was elite and, on their own, then we wouldn't be having this discussion anyway.
Okay, games ahead. LSU, 14th in the league with 8 sacks allowed. Kentucky is 8th in the league with 16 sacks. I'm sorry, for LSU, I meant sacks, not sacks allowed. So another lower half of the league team. Auburn has got 15 sacks. That ranks 10th. Georgia, if they were to meet Georgia in the title game, Georgia's got 12 sacks, which is only one more than last place Florida. So good news is that the teams coming up on the schedule are not on your list of get after the passer teams. And by the way, they played the top 3 in sacks so far. That's A&M, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. But, of course, the other side of that is Alabama's had a hand in getting those teams where they are on the charts. So I guess that's the good news, is that if you're Alabama, the teams that are left on your schedule are not big time get after the passer teams in terms of sacks. And Andrew brings up pressure rate's a better stat than sacks, and he's right about that. I just don't have it in front of me. Yeah. So,
Well,
but bad news is it just hasn't mattered. So
yeah, look, and I don't think that think Saban and that program's goals long term, what they want to see this season, are more so than just this regular season. So, although it may not get exposed, and these teams coming up that are known to rush the passer, if they don't fix this or at least find a way to decrease it by the time they reach Atlanta, if they do, or by the time they reach the playoff, if they do, I think it may come back to hurt them.
okay, buy or sell. Alabama gets through the regular season to the SEC title game unbeaten from here on out. Remember, they've lost one against
Yep.
Texas, of course, just so people don't jump on me in the comments. But
Yeah.
do they win out or not?
I'm gonna buy it. I think they do. And
Okay.
here's why I think they do is because they get LSU at home. If LSU was on the road, I'd be nervous about it. But LSU's at home, and I think they've been. I mean, let's look back at LSU, how they started the season, obviously getting embarrassed on national TV, then started playing well, and then lost a big game on the road at Ole Miss. Didn't look great in the first half against Missouri. Found a way to come back and win that game. So they've just kind of been a little bit up and down. I have no clue what LSU team we're going to see walk on that field on in Tuscaloosa in 2 weeks. I have no clue. If I did, maybe I'd be selling this a little bit more. But I think they're going to win that game. Obviously, we're in rivalry when we've seen some crazy stuff happen in the past. I think they take care of that one, and they end up having a date with Georgia and Atlanta for a playoff spot. I'm buying that, Chris.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Alabama gets LSU just by virtue of that being at home. I'm looking this up on team rankings, though, because I'm looking up how's LSU done away from home. Opener in Orlando, lost to Florida State. At Mississippi State, won that one in a walk away. At Ole Miss, got beat there. Missouri won that one with a really good second half performance. So LSU fifth in the country in road rating. Let me see what Alabama is at home because it's got a loss.
Yeah, it does.
To Texas. Yeah, and this is not a big sample size, but Alabama 13th in the country at home, according to this. So I don't know how much to make of that because there's not a lot of home and road games in there, but just to quantify it as something that's someone who's made the effort. That's better than I've got.
Yeah. No, we'll see. I like I said, I think that I'd be surprised if Bama dropped another one. I would be in terms of the regular season, but at the same time, this conference has been as volatile as it's been in recent memory. So I think anything can happen. We're just over the halfway point, so we shall see.
Okay, Andrew asks, who wins if it's Bama and Georgia? Again, that is, I think with what I'm looking at, that is a toss-up game at the morning. I think it's as close to a pick 'em as you can get.
I think so too, but I also would feel a lot better. But I don't know what Georgia looks like without Brock Bowers. I don't know what Georgia playing at a national championship caliber level looks like without Brock Bowers because they've won both of them with him. And so it's hard for me to say that now. Maybe let me see them play Florida. Maybe let them get another game under their belt. But yeah, I need to see what Georgia looks like without Brock Bowers because that definitely changes some things.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I think the thing that stands out to me is I can certainly make a case for Alabama getting there. I can certainly make a case for Georgia getting there, but the margin for error is just a lot smaller than any of the Alabama teams we've talked about recently.
Absolutely, that's exactly what that kind of summarizes everything we've talked about. Really, this team, Chris, is look. They're not as we're not going to look back on this team and say there was any Alabama greats, technically, right? There's not, an Alabama greats that everyone thinks about. Oh, but they just function differently. They're not a Hall of Fame team. Can they still be an elite team making the playoff? I guess, that's what we'll have to see. And especially you really have to see in this LSU game coming up. But yeah, nothing necessarily jumps off the page with this team, but they're finding a way to get it done. And they obviously have a great staff and Saban, Steele, and Tommy Rees on the offensive side. They figure some things out. Different makeup, not necessarily as good, not a bad team for sure, but I think just a different team that we're used to seeing in Tuscaloosa.
Now here's another issue, and this is just yards per play. And this is according to teamrankings.com, yards per play, and they throw out games that don't involve FBS schools. Get this. I love it. And this is why I think this is going to be hard for them to win it all. 5.5 yards a play. That ranks 59th nationally, Gavin. That's just not – I don't think that you can win a national championship with an offense playing at that level. Now, look, maybe they've got another level in them. Again, you take the South Florida game out of that, and I think Alabama probably goes up 12, 15 spots in the ranking, but still you're in the, if I'm right, you're in the 30s. I'm trying to remember when the last time a team won a national title with an offense in that range, and I just can't think of one. Can you?
No, I can't. But if there were, I think that there's a year to do it. Also, like, these are all statistics, and they're great to talk about because that's flow and it's shown pattern and rhythms of teams and like the chemical makeup of teams that have won in the past. But I just think we've said it all year long, Chris. This year's different. This year's funky. Yeah. It's not like a normal year. And so, look, I'm not saying that you need to throw out every stat from this season as an outlier or whatever it may be, but this year's just different. And we've seen teams go down. There's not that, elite absolute bunch of teams. And, that's why I think we really got to play all these games to the finish, is because who knows, something may happen that you and I, or really everybody watching this podcast, never saw coming, and it totally shakes up, the route moving forward. And if there's a year, all I'm saying is if there's a year for it to happen, and it's this year, because it's already proven once and once again that, it's going to deliver those moments for us.
Well, witness what happened this weekend, okay? Nobody had Virginia beating North Carolina.
Yeah.
You had close calls. Let's see where. Duke led Florida State in the fourth quarter, I believe, and then got its quarterback hurt somewhere there. Washington beat an awful Arizona State team that's 1-6, did not score an offensive touchdown. Oklahoma beat UCF is what I think Oklahoma's a 20-something point favorite. I think UCF led maybe late into that game. Texas had fits with Houston, won that one by 7. And I feel like I'm missing one or two others here, but you get my point.
Yeah.
You just had a lot of games this weekend that nobody had on the radar to be games.
Yeah.
And I think, I use stats because it's the only thing that we have to quantify things. But as I say this a lot of times too, your number of games where a team plays another good team is pretty limited. A lot of your games are against Akrons and Ball States, and those things are part of the stats too. So I think that when you get into games with somebody who can stop what you're doing or give you problems in ways that things that Akron can't do to you that Georgia can, it's a different ball game. But
right.
I think this weekend, to your point, showed there's a lot of parity in college football, and it extends down beyond those elite teams where there's a ton of parity.
Yeah. Well, I think it showed this weekend, but I think it's going to show even more moving forward, right? And as teams become more desperate, games mean a little bit more, as you get towards the end of the year, because, obviously there's hundreds and hundreds of games in between. It's recency bias. That's what it is, right? And so these games mean so much more coming down the stretch. Teams know what's at stake. Opposing teams know what's at stake. These playoff, pickers and the committee, they know what's at stake. And so these games become, so much more meaningful. And I think the parity is still there. So who knows? We may end up with a little bit of a wacky finish here, Chris, but I'm all for it.
Oh, I think we're absolutely going to have one. Okay, I want to get into Florida, Georgia, and a couple other weekend thoughts because I think that one's suddenly interesting. Before we do, got two sponsors we want to give a shout out to. First is Chomps. It is my go-to snack after a workout, at halftime of a football game, you name it. Chomps is good for any occasion. 9 flavors, so one for everybody. Start with a trial pack of 6 different flavors, all 3 proteins. That trial pack is a winner, guys. And I don't have any today with me. I need to order some because they're that good. We went through them in a hurry. It is Chomps is gluten-free, free of the top 9 allergens, no hidden harmful ingredients. Check out the promo code at the bottom of the video to get 15% off. Podcast also sponsored by myperfectfranchise.net. If you are sick of working for someone else and looking for a better life that you can live more on your terms, and someone who can help you understand the risks and rewards of that, Andy Ludicky, My Perfect Franchise, is that guy. He'll help you find the perfect franchise based on your goals, your dreams, your skills, your financial requirements. In other words, your personalized American dream. He'll educate you on the process, work with you every step of the way. There's no obligation. His services are free. He is in this to do a solid for you. He's trying to get you matched with the right company that meets your lifestyle goals, leaves you time for your kids, whatever that may be. He is not looking to put you with this company or that company just because it is better for him financially. Really good, honest guy, high integrity. Call him 404-973-9901. Fill out a free questionnaire and get started. Okay, Gavin, Florida, Georgia in Jacksonville this weekend. I never thought I'd be saying this. And by the way, it's not just because Brock Bowers isn't playing. I think the way that Florida controls games, I don't think that this was a really talented team that Billy Napier's got. I think a lot of the criticism of him before the season was unfair, but they had some things to build on. They had a rushing attack with Montrell Johnson, Trevor Etienne. Those guys have not performed, I think, up to my expectations so far. Etienne's been hurt a little bit, but they're capable. They've got a track record.
Yep.
They had a Graham Mertz, and that was one of the bigger wild cards in this league because Graham Mertz at Wisconsin was very up and down and probably just more mediocre than he was a star. But Graham Mertz was a 4- and 5-star recruit out of high school. There was always this potential there. Feels like they have tapped into something. Two things that I like with them, okay? They've got dudes making plays downfield now.
Mm-hmm.
Ricky Pearsall Jr. has developed into one of the better playmakers in this league. Hollis Sportingham's been really good lately. Quincy Wilson's been very good. That's 3 guys, and I think they completed passes to 7 or 8 guys in their last game. That's number one. They've got some guys who can make plays downfield where I didn't know that was necessarily going to happen. We have seen that start to come to fruition. Number 2, I'm going to have to look this up, but Graham Mertz's completion percentage
it's like historic.
Up there.
Yeah.
And let me find the numbers. It is not – look, he's not going to win the Heisman. It's not like he is lighting the world on fire with some historic season. That's not what I'm saying. In fact, he is averaging 271 yards passing. That's 5th in the league, okay?
Yeah.
Pass efficiency, he's 6th. I'm not really sure how. And we don't talk about completion percentage a lot, but I think it's important. And his is number 1 in the SEC. He's completing over 76% of his passes.
Yeah, that's legit.
And this is what I'm getting at, okay? And all the numbers that we look at that determine who's the great quarterback, yards per attempt, all that. Mertz is good, not great. But I think that completion percentage is important.
Yeah.
Because of what it does, if you hit on a 4-yard completion on 3rd and 3, it is not much in the stat sheet. But what it does is it keeps a drive alive to make a play later. I think Florida's defense has only been on the field 59 plays a game.
Wow.
If they can continue that formula against Georgia, and again, he's got some guys that have made big plays. You've seen it with Pearsall. I think that's why this is a sneakily good game. And I'll look up the 3rd down stats, but I just think Florida's ability to hold on to the ball and a solid defense makes this a lot more interesting than I would have said even a couple of weeks ago.
I think that, combined with the Brock Bowers injury for sure, because Georgia, I think it really has maybe, I don't want to say doubt, but just there's a little bit of a dark cloud, going into that bye week with, Bowers going down and getting an ankle repaired. And that's not easy seeing your best player do that, especially knowing, you have a tough game coming up. But yeah, I got to give my props where it's due. I mean, Chris, we sat here after that Utah game and totally talked about how long is Florida going to wait, for Billy Napier and all that. Like, those are conversations that people were having on in national media. And, he's turned around and won some big games. And now they have the biggest one of all so far, and that's against, Georgia and Jacksonville. And so I think Mertz, knowing that you're going to throw the ball and that 76, 78, whatever the exact number you said was, Chris, percent of the time, it's going to end up as a gain in your player's hands. That's a pretty good feeling as an offensive coordinator. And that opens up the run game a ton. But think about how much back there, and you see like a play action, you kind of feel the momentum building as the guy's holding onto the ball. of any team in this conference. But as a Florida fan, knowing that close to 80% of the time when he lets go of that ball, it's going to be a catch and a completion, like that's pretty significant and gives me a ton of confidence. And so I think it's allowed them to build their run game as well, which they already had an identity in. Now they can do some play action and open up some things and, some of the flooded parts of the field. And so I got to give my credit where it's due there. All of a sudden, we talked preseason about Georgia having this cupcake schedule, and all of a sudden you look down the end here and they got some tough games. They got a run of tough games, if we're being honest. They got Florida and Jacksonville, and then they turn around and they play Missouri, which is playing at best levels we've seen in a long time. Then they play Ole Miss, who we all know is having a solid year, already beat LSU. Then they go to Tennessee, which is maybe the toughest environment in this conference to get a win in. And then at Georgia Tech, obviously. But, I mean, man, we talked about this being a cupcake schedule for these guys. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's a little bit of a tough finish here. And so I think we're going to see a lot of we need to see people rise to the surface for Georgia in absence of Brock Bowers, but they need to stay true to their identity in terms of playing hard-nosed defense and, explosive offense, especially if they're going to find a way to win this one in Jacksonville.
Yeah, this falls apart a little bit because Florida's 12th in the league in third down conversions, 33%. But here's the thing. They've only had 81 third down conversions. And there's only one team in the league with fewer than that, and that's attempts, and that's Kentucky. And here's what I'm getting at, okay? They don't get to third down as much because they're making the plays on first and second down to move the chains. And that's going to be tougher against Georgia. That ultimately I don't think Florida wins the game because I think you're probably going to be more in 3rd and 6 and 3rd and 7 than 3rd and 1 to 3rd and 2 against Georgia than you are against some other teams. But look, it's interesting. And this kid who's played a lot of football, you're playing in Jacksonville, so it's a neutral environment. I think Graham Mertz has given them a chance to where if Florida wins this game, look, I'm not predicting it. I think Georgia will win. But if Florida goes and beats Georgia this weekend, it might not be the craziest thing we've seen all year.
No, I don't think so. But I think that what you brought up about third down is so huge because third down, it's basically it's a possession down. I mean, it's either are you getting the ball back for a new set of downs, or are you eventually going to punt and give the ball over on a special teams play. And so we always talk about all the time, and I know this is a common phrase in other locker rooms as well. But the best way to get better on third down is to avoid third down. Have efficient first and second down plays. And, they found a way to do that. So I got to credit them for that one. And it starts establishing the run and then the play action and then the over-the-top passes. That's really the formula for success, especially now, with Bowers down as well. So, yeah, but Florida can dictate games. We've seen it. They kind of play under their terms, if you will. It's their terms and kind of their rules, and the other team adjusts to it. So I'm interested to see if they can establish that, before Georgia tries to really jump all over them.
And are you watching the chat?
No.
It's getting salty between LSU and Alabama fans here.
Hey, that just means more. Passionate, yes. Man. I get it. It's passionate.
2 weeks out, and they're here for it. Of course, Alabama's got a bye week, and so does LSU. So that just gives everybody 2 weeks to do this, which will be fun. So, all right. We we spent most of our time on Alabama, why it can make a run or not make a run to the NCAA title today. We just talked a little bit about Florida, Georgia, why we think that might be a better matchup than you'd think at first glance. I know you had a thing or two you wanted to talk about before we get out of here, so I'll give you the floor here.
For which game specifically were you talking about?
Oh, I thought you had some remaining thoughts. I'm sorry.
No, I think just overall, I was doing some research because I'm always thinking ahead about what this is going to look like. And, you at the beginning of the show, Chris, went through potential playoff teams. And like I said, I ended up with 9 teams. Washington, Florida State, assuming they went out, 2-13, no teams. And then you're looking at 7 teams with 1 loss. Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia. Like blue blood programs. And it's just going to be interesting to see how the committee sorts that out. If that's how we end up really going, is who's crowned a champion, but they already beat them in the past. It's going to get a little messy if we think this is the way it's going to go. But that's why we play the games. And like we said earlier, I think Georgia beating Florida, Florida beating Georgia this weekend in Jacksonville may not be the craziest thing we see all year. I think we're up for a wacky finish here, y'all. I really do.
Yeah, I do too. We will unpack playoffs later in the week. We'll probably spend a good bit of the show doing that. I don't know, not sure which day that'll be yet, but we'll figure it out. So hope you guys will stick around for that. And best way to do that, hit the subscribe button and enable your notifications. We go live every day from about 11 to 11:45 Central. If you want more reactions on this weekend's games, go to our channel. Check out the live stream we did Saturday night. I thought that went for about an hour and hit a lot of points there. And we'll be here to talk football all week, 11 to about 11:45 daily. Again, hit that subscribe button so you can get that. For Gavin Schoenwald, I'm Chris Lee. This is the SEC Daily here at Southeastern 14. We appreciate you watching. We'll see you again soon.